Well, hello everybody. Welcome to P.B.M. Money. Today I want to talk about something that has kind of been irritating me ever since I was in high school. And I'm going to tie it to our current economic times. Now, if you're watching the internet, you keep hearing people talk about there's a real estate bubble that's about to pop. Now, I remember when this happened back in the 80s. And the government jumped in and tried to do all of these things to stop it from happening. And for the most part, they did. I mean, it was tough. But the government didn't want people to fail because they were afraid, just like they were in the early 2000s, that that bubble was too big to break. And what I'm saying is, let's let capitalism be capitalism and not a quasi-capitalism. Now, right up front, I want to say I think there are some exceptions to that rule. And I think we learned one in the 1930s when the stock market is based a lot on emotion, and especially today when it is fueled by technology. I do think there needs to be stops on it. I do think there needs to be cooling off times for emotions to set aside. Just like when you're in a marriage. If you're fighting and both sides are angry, maybe you need to take time out. Let both sides cool down and come back and look at it again. Now, let's talk about this real estate bubble that may be coming to burst. Some say it's because the costs are too high. The real estate market is too high. And in some areas, I would say that that's probably true. Or that the rental market is high. And I would agree with that too. But let's look at that closer. Rather than the government jump in and try to subsidize the rental market by giving money away, what if we let the market take care of itself? What if we let's say let's go back and look at the 80s. Fanny and Freddie were packaging all of these real estate loans and selling them to investors. Now, after the big crack up, we found out that the managers at Fannie and Freddie were getting paid exorbitant amount of money. They were making tens of millions of dollars every year putting these packages together and selling them. Does that sound like capitalism? I mean, what is the government doing guaranteeing loans to people that shouldn't have them and then taking those and selling them for money that businesses shouldn't be buying them? If a real estate loan is worth making, the bankers know it. They don't need a guarantee from the government. If it takes 20% down for the bankers to know that the loan is going to be okay 80% of the time, then maybe we ought to let that be true. Why do we need FHA to guarantee 96.5% of the loan? And by the way, in order to get a real estate loan for most banks, you got to have a decent credit rating. Did you know that with FHA they could go as low as 5 something on their credit rating and still only require 3.5% down? That's not capitalism. Capitalism is the market will tolerate what the market will tolerate. If the banks aren't making enough loans to make enough money, they'll make more loans. They'll find a way to make the loans. I watched something on a show the other day. They were talking about a new Ketchup startup company. And when you think about it, 2 companies got the market cornered, all right? But there is an entrepreneur out there that thinks that he can make a better ketchup, then let him go do it. But not at the expense of everybody else. Why should he get special loan privileges or special loan guarantees for his ketchup when the other 2 didn't? Now, this particular company isn't getting special loans and guarantees. They're trying to go raise money just like capitalists do. But in the real estate market in the 1980s, the federal government stepped in and said, hey, under the guise of racism, we're going to guarantee all loans. The only guarantee you have to do is be breathing. You don't even have to have a job. I know that's true because that happened to me. I went to just inquire about a loan, and 15 minutes later they had me approved for a $50,000 loan. I didn't even go in for that. Now, you say, well, what's the consequences? What's the difference? Well, we might have had a downswing in the construction market and the housing market. That would probably have happened. But that's a normal cycle of business. When Fanny and Freddie stepped in and they put all of these government restrictions and dumped all that money in, guess what? In 2008, it all came tumbling down because the banking system had too many bad loans out there. I think it was Lehman Brothers was the first one to fall. You can only buy so much crap before what you're spitting out and what you've got in inventory is crap. If Lehman Brothers would have had to gone out and researched their own investments, done their own loans, and done it at their own expense, they would have been a lot more careful. Just like the bankers today. I've recently gotten back into real estate, and the bankers today are not bankers. They're box checkers. Credit rating above 600, check. Income over blah, check. Home inspection, check. And there's a good one. One house I bought needed to have a termite inspection. The very next one, they didn't need a termite inspection. And it was the same bank. Same type of real estate loan. But because that one was selling to Freddie, one was selling to Fanny, the requirements were different. Income is different. The income requirements. Now, right after this last go around with the 2008, we just recovered. By the way, in 2008, they started dumping all that stimulus money in. Another socialist move with the to fix the capitalist problem. And here we are, 14 years later, and now we're paying for all of that stimulus with a bad economy. You can only put so much garbage in before it starts to turn to garbage out. The whole theory behind capitalism is just because you can't make it go doesn't mean I can't make it go. So if somebody in the real estate market is going to go belly up, let them go belly up. They should have let Lehman Brothers go belly up. Somebody would have came in and taken up their debt, or let the investors find their own debt. Let the businesses fail. There's no such thing as too big to fail. That's on the consumer to decide. If your bank fails, the government will guarantee the funds up to $250,000. And the FDIC was one of the ideas from the 1930s that I do agree with. If we're going to have a national banking system, then there needs to be checks and balances in there to guarantee the funds. You can't have the wild, wild west. However, in the real estate market, buyer beware. Now, if the government hadn't stepped in and enough people were getting burned, don't you think companies would have stepped in and said, hey, we'll guarantee the house for a fee? They have that. But the key to letting capitalism work is let businesses and people fail. Let them start fresh. Give them every opportunity to win. But if they lose, let them lose, because somebody else will step in and pick up their work at a discounted price, and they'll make it work. And that works for all of society, not just the buyers of the business. Don't you think that if Lehman Brothers would have been allowed to fail, and the other banks and investment companies had invested in those loans, don't you think somebody would have come in and figured out a way to repackage and remarket those loans to where the rates might have come down on their own, and the government stayed out of it? Or what about in 2008, when all that stimulus money went in? They put trillions of dollars in our economy for 12 or 13 years to prop the market up so that we would have a prosperous time. What is the definition of too much money chasing too few goods? That's called inflation. Well, we've had 12 years of too much cash. Now everybody's surprised we're going to have an extended recession. Why? Why are you surprised? That's the very definition. And I know, as sure as I'm sitting here, that when the time comes, the government's going to step in and say, here's our fix, we're going to fix it this way. Well, how about you stay out of it and let the economy fix it? Let the bankers that made the bad loans or bought the bad loans, let them go belly up, because somebody else will come in and figure out a way to make money at that. That is not to say that there should not be some checks and balances, like the stock market. That is run on emotion and technology, and yes, we do need to have cooling off periods if it drops too fast. But why are we giving bonuses to Fanny and Freddie managers to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars a year to guarantee loans? If you're going to give me $10 for every loan that I speak for the government that I'm going to guarantee, I got news for you. Nobody's going to be rejected. Everybody's going to get a loan. As Oprah would say, you get a loan, and you get a loan, and you get a loan, and you get a loan. Because every loan I guarantee on the face of the government means money to me. By definition, that is socialism. We are not a socialist country. For the people that are yelling for protection from the stock market or from businesses failing or banks failing, learn the rules, play by the rules. If your bank guarantees their funds to $250,000, don't put $500,000 in there and expect to get it back. Spread it out over many banks. There is money to be made when businesses fail. When AGI insurance was called too big to fail, let me ask you a question. Don't you think that for all of the insurance policies that AGI had, don't you think if the government would have said, hey, you made the bad loans, we're out, figure it out. Don't you think they would have figured out a way to sell those assets, sell the good assets, suck up some of the bad ones, and at least been able to stay in business? Instead, they ran to the government and the government tried to pay them out. And I'll tell you a difference in the time. Lee Iacocca used to manage Ford Motor Company. And in the 1970s, I believe, it might have been the 80s, his company was going bankrupt. And I don't remember the cause. But he went to the federal government and said, hey, I need a loan. And he went to the government because he needed a big loan. And his company was already on the skids. They gave him the loan. And when they made the loan, I was upset about that. Because if Ford had gone out of business, don't you think somebody would have stepped up and bought Ford for pennies on the dollar and created a new company? But they didn't. But here's what Iacocca did, and it restored my confidence in Americans at that time. When he got the loan, he announced that his management team and board of directors were going to receive $1 per year for salary until that loan was paid off to the government. And they did in record time. That is the ingenuity of Americans. When we're under the gun, we find a way to perform. We don't run to the government and ask for a handout like they did in 2008. Or they did in the late 1980s. Now, with the market down 30 or 40%, we're not done. The market's going to go down more, and it's going to take longer to come back. And if the market doesn't have a good comeback by the time elections come around, I guarantee you the government's going to start writing checks and guaranteeing things they shouldn't be doing. What I'm saying is, as much as the pain is right now, the economic downturn we're having now has been magnified from what it should have been in 2008. If the government would have kept their hands off of everything and just let the bad players fail and go belly up, Americans learn their lessons from free money, and let's get back to capitalism. If they'd let that happen, yes, the market would have gone down. Yes, we would have had a recession, but we would have been stronger for it, and we wouldn't be having near the troubles we're having today. But because the government got involved, dumped all those trillions of dollars in there and propped it up for all of these years, and now the government wants to try to get out, which, by the way, I think is the right thing. But because it's happened for so long, now the economy is acting apoplectic because they're getting it back to where it should be. But the government being what the government is, I'm just saying right here and right now in front of God and everybody, keep your hands off of the market, keep your hands off of the real estate market, keep your hands out of the capitalist markets. Let capitalism be capitalism, and we will be stronger, we will be better, and we will be back, no matter what the turmoil is right here and right now. We are a 200-year-old experiment, and every time something happens, the government wants to jump in and turn it socialist. Back off and let capitalism be capitalism. You guys have a great day, a great week, and happy investing.